Hello, Master Mike Dunchok here at Ancient Arts in Irvine, California. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the difference, but also the similarity between two different elemental systems in Oriental cosmology. And those two systems are, on the one hand, what's called the Wuxing, the classical Daoist 5 elements, and on the other hand, the Mahabhuta, or the 4 great Buddhist elements. So you're probably familiar with one or the other, or either of these two systems. So for a quick review, just to see what we're talking about, the Buddhist elements include the 4 elements that are known to us in the West from ancient Greek and European traditions, which are earth, air, fire, and water. And the reason that those are the same in Buddhism as well as in Europe is because Buddhism comes from India. And there is something called the Indo-European language system, or the Indo-European culture. And it is universal between India and the West because it's the same people who started in one part of the world. Some went east to India, and the rest went west to Europe. And they brought their system with them. On the other hand, in Taoism, which is exclusively Chinese, at least in origin, we have a different elemental system. In theirs, you'll find earth, metal, water, wood, and fire. So at first glance, one may look at these two systems and see discrepancies. One might think, well, one is a 4-element system, the other is a 5-element system. Some of the elements are the same, like earth, fire, and water, but others, like air and metal and wood, do not occur in the other. And so we might think, what's going on here? If these systems are supposed to describe something real, well, they can't both describe something real if they're both different. But are they really different? So let's take a closer look. First, we've got to remember that the 4-element system is still, in fact, a 5-element system. Usually, there's a 5th element added. In India, that 5th element is akasha. In Greece, that same 5th element was called ether. Sometimes in modern systems, it's simply called spirit. Or pneuma. Pneuma also means, pneuma also means breath, which also spirit means too. Spirit comes from the same word for respirate. So these latter two words have to do with breathing and air. Same as chi does. Chi also has to do with air or gas. So the 4-element system is actually a 5-element system when you consider that the 5th, the balancing element, there's one final name for it that was used in European alchemy called quintessence, the quinta essentia, or the quintessence, which is the 5th element. So we've all heard of the 5th element. The 5th element is meant to be the origin and also the unification of the other 4. So often that's presented or represented as a kind of cross diagram with a circle where you have the unity of the 4 elements with the 5th occupying the center. Now, the Wuxing, or 5-element system of Taoism, actually I already have it up here, is arrayed so, just like this. We have earth becoming metal, becoming water, becoming wood, becoming fire, and then becoming earth again. And what I just described they call the creative cycle, because each of these is supposed to generate its successor. On the other hand, internally, we can see this pentagram drawn inside the circle, and that describes a different set of relationships between these elements. And here we'll see that water puts out fire, fire melts metal, metal chops wood, wood splits earth, and earth dams up water. So this internal pentagram describes the way the elements control or destroy each other, as opposed to the outer circle, which describes the way they create or generate each other. But leaving that arrangement aside, sometimes in Taoism, they do in fact represent those same 5 elements in a cross pattern, like so. And when they do, they tend to put earth in the center. And then they'll put water in the north. And they'll put fire in the south because it's hot down there in the equator. And then that leaves wood, which they put in the east. And of course metal, which they put in the west. So already we can see a similarity between this and the 5-element Buddhist system. And of course in that one, in that original system we described over here, the central element was spirit or quintessence, the 5th element. So if anything, there may be just a problem with nomenclature, a problem with semantics, in that when the Daoists describe earth, what they seem to mean is what the Buddhists mean when they describe akasha or spirit, or when the Greeks describe quintessence. So, if we think that there's a problem with naming and that that's where the misunderstanding lay, we might look a little bit deeper. So, sticking with Taoism, now let's give it a clear slate here. So these elements describe a cosmological system. They're meant to describe the way the phases of nature work and circulate and cycle upon each other. We might also look at this cosmogonically, which is a different phrasing. Okay, so as I was saying, 4-element and 5-element systems describe phases. They are cosmological systems. They describe the operation of the universe as it is. But to explain further, perhaps to explore further, I'm going to discuss a cosmogonic system, which is more about the origin of the universe and how it comes to be. And that might give us a way to link these two systems together. So, sticking with Taoism, Taoism describes the beginning of the universe, the original state of all things, with an empty circle. And this emptiness they call Wuji. Wu meaning nothingness or not. The thing is, when you have nothing, once you call it nothing, it becomes something. What is it? It's nothing. So to name the thing makes it no longer the original thing. It's no longer the same nothing it was before it was named. So to do so introduces a dichotomy, and there's a pull between these two potentials, the unexpressed nothing and the expressed nothing. So then nothing is really one thing. And that dichotomy that's introduced is the familiar yin-yang, and they call that Taiji. The martial art Taiji is named after this. It's Taiji Chuan, the supreme ultimate fist. So Taiji means the supreme ultimate. And that's what we're describing, the supreme ultimate here. Yin and yang, off and on, 0 and 1, male and female. All the great poles and opposite potentials of the universe emerge here. Now in Taoism, traditionally, they would represent yang with a solid line, and yin with a broken line. So yin is hollow and yang is solid. So this teardrop, if this was black, I won't bother to shade it in, but if that was black, we would consider that the yin one, and the white one is the yang one. But as we can see, I haven't drawn a simple straight line through these two, meaning that they swirl one into the other, and it's not quite determinate whether at any given moment we're dealing with yin or yang. That element of time, where they have to both share, introduces threshold areas where we're in between yin and yang. And this represents a sort of emanationist description of the creation of the universe, where the interaction of yin and yang and their struggle or their contention or their cycling generates more and more possibilities. So these threshold areas, if we describe this over here as pure yin and this over here as pure yang, then at the threshold we might have, well, yang is becoming yin. And here it's pure yin. And then down here we might say, oh, well, yin, it's becoming yang. And then over here is pure yang. So I'll represent what we just did here. So we have yang that splits in potentiality. Yang with yang with yin. Yin with more yin with a little bit of yang. Now if you notice, we have 4 designated phases here. Pure yang, pure yin, and then 2 iterations of mixed yin and yang. These are the 4 elements, or they can be. In Taoism, they simply equate these with 4 of the 5 element that they have. So this one, the double yang, they would call fire. And the double yin, they would call water. And then the yang with some yin, they would call wood. And the yin with some yang, they would call metal. So already we have something in the ballpark of an equivalency to the Buddhist 4 great elements. Especially if we take these 4 and we name them something different. Traditionally, this one with the double solid lines is called major yang. And this one with a little bit of yin is called minor yang. And then over here, the double yin we call major yin. And the yin with a little bit of yang we call minor yin. These 4 give us the connection to counterparts in the Buddhist system, because we can say, well, major yang and major yin, that's fire and water in both systems. So here's fire, and here's water. And it may be that what the Buddhists call here as air or wind, the Daoists call wood. At least if we look at this as the cycles of the time of day, where this is noon, and this is morning, and this is midnight, and this is, this is dusk, and this is midnight. If we were to equate those with the Buddhist elements and the Taoist elements, they occupy the same portions on the compass as well as in the sundial. So we have here air or wood as a descriptor for minor yang. And then over here, metal or earth as a description for minor yin. Now, I was saying before that the center of the diagram was occupied by earth in Taoism and by Akasha or spirit in Buddhism. So, if we look at what is being said by this centrally occupied position, is there's some kind of regulating role here. That the one that's the meeting ground between all the other four is somehow the combination and the origin of the other four. So we don't need to get too hung up on the word earth there, because there's really two senses of the word earth. And it may be that in the translation that what was described as earth in the five-element system, maybe it had better be described as something like planet or like Gaia or something like that. Whereas the single part of the quaternity that we called earth would be better described as something like terra or soil or even metal. So the hard aspect of metal is maybe what's being gone for there instead of the overarching totality of the planet Earth, which would contain all the other four the way this one does. So there's another description in Taoism of these elements that brings us even closer to this idea. So the Daoists would say that fire has an upward moving energy. At least in acupuncture they say that the energy of fire is upward moving. It always comes up to the head. Usually what happens is the liver will become blocked or stagnant, and then the friction of the blocked liver chi will then rise and create heat that comes to the head. Someone will get high blood pressure, headaches, red face, and so forth. This is called fire. And conversely, a descending arrow, energy that moves downward in acupuncture and oriental medicine, they call dampness. And dampness congeals in the ankles like edema, or it congeals in the gut or the genitals. And altogether, it's a ponderous and dragging influence on the activity of the body. But then we have energy that expands, starts from the center and comes outward. And in Oriental medicine, that's what the wood energy does. This is one of the functions of the liver to distribute qi through the body. So this expansiveness is a quality associated with wood. Likewise, the ability to congeal and draw together, as the lungs do, is a function of metal. Now, if we were to equate this with the classical four Buddhist elements, earth, air, fire, and water, this expansive quality is exactly what is meant by air. And sure enough, if we look into Oriental medicine again, the liver creates another element called wind. You can have liver wind in the body. So wind is very connected with the liver as well as wood. So we can definitely consider those the same thing. And then likewise, metal is a congealing, solidifying, solid substance. And the fact that it's called metal doesn't mean anything unless we consider the fact that the solidness of the metal is what's meant to be conveyed. And in that, it's very much like the idea of earth in a four-element system, where earth is the most dense between air, fire, water, and earth. So metal is really another word for the solidness of earth. Whereas this fifth thing, which is circulation, and this is associated with the spleen organ in Oriental medicine. This circulation is the job of this central position here. And thus, with Daoist named earth and Buddhist named spirit. All right, I hope that makes sense. We can even see, if we look to the West, there's even a Western connotation with this idea. In alchemy, in European alchemy, there were spirits for the 4 elements. The salamanders, the undines, the gnomes, and for air was the sylphs. But if we take the word sylvan, which is the adjective related to the noun sylph, sylvan somehow describes forests and wood. So even in the West, there's a connection between wood and air. It's funny the way it works out that way. But anyway, these 5 movements of energy are the real understanding you should have of the 5 elements. And the individual designator, the appellation, the nomenclature, doesn't matter. What matters is the emanations of the phases and how they are parts of the branching out from the original oneness of all things. All right. I hope that makes sense. Thank you.